Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome if you're new. I hope you're all doing well and welcome back to a video related to the magical Hopathon. Hi guys, in today's video I'm going to be recommending some books that you could kind of fit into the prompts that are a little bit out there. Obviously because you haven't read books, you don't know kind of maybe what they entail. So some of the prompts like multiple perspective, takes place on a road trip or something like that. Where the main characters aren't human is another one. So there's a few prompts that are a little bit out there. So I wanted to create this video to kind of give you some ideas on how to fulfill some of the trickier prompts that I have on my prompts list that you can pick between for the magical Hopathon. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then I am hosting a readathon in October to celebrate Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary. It is called the Magical Hopathon. La, 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 la. And it's basically, the aim is to hop around the Walt Disney World Resort, completing prompts as you go relating to the attractions there, the snacks there, and the shows in the Walt Disney World Resort. So it's going to be a fun and magical time, but I created a whole list of prompts. So here today I'm just going to recommend you some books based off those prompts if you need a little help curating your TBR. So without further ado, let's hop into it. See, the hopping into it, Hopathon. I'm a genius. The first prompt I want to kind of run over and give you some book recommendations for is the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, which is a ride at the Magic Kingdom. And that's the prompt to read a book with multiple perspectives. I'm not going to go into depth with these books because I have quite a few to reel off and I don't want this video to be really, really long. I'm just going to kind of give you an overview and give you some ideas of kind of where you could go with that prompt. We have Birthday by Meredith Rosso. This is told in two perspectives, two best friends who only meet on their birthday, and one of them is kind of figuring out who they are as they're going through the transitioning of male to female. This was a brilliant book. It's one of my top books of 2020. It got a 5 stars. I really recommend this book. If you're looking for a short kind of contemporary that's really quick to get through, that kind of hits on really good topics, that is told in multiple perspectives, because you get Morgan and Eric. Yeah, you get Morgan and Eric's perspective in this story. The next one, told in dual perspectives, that I'm going to recommend, that is really, really quick to get through because it's told in verse, is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. This book basically follows two sisters who don't know each other exist until their father died in a plane crash traveling from one sister to the next sister, and it's told in verse. So you literally can't go wrong with this book for a readathon. The next book I'm going to recommend is told in more than two perspectives. You can do as many perspectives as you want for this prompt. It doesn't have to just be two characters. It can be more than two characters. And this book covers 3 perspectives, and that is the Kiss of Deception series by Mary U. Pearson. But this is told in 3 perspectives. One from the princess, one from the assassin sent to kill her, and one from the prince that she was meant to marry but ran away from because she didn't want to marry the prince anymore that her father set her up with. So I love this fantasy series. This book, a spoiler, could also cover the prompt for Cheeseburger Pods in Animal Kingdom because it is told in multiple genres. It is a fantasy, but it also heavily hits on romance. So there we go, 2 birds with 1 stone with this one. And the last book I'm going to recommend for multiple perspectives, if you want a great steamy kind of smutty book, that is A Sweet Mess by J.T. Lee. It's told in 2 perspectives of Aubrey and Landon, so the 2 love interests of this book. And it basically follows our main character Aubrey, who runs a really successful bakery called The Comfort Zone, and Landon is a food critic. He is on the way to review a really famous restaurant, but unfortunately his car breaks down and he has to stop off at the nearest town, and this town just happens to be where Aubrey's bakery is. So he goes in and gets served the wrong cake, so he writes up a really bad review for her bakery, and then he realizes that they're in love and he has to try and sort out the sticky situation that he's put her in when she is about to lose her business because of this one bad review. And it's great for steamy scenes, let me tell you. So that is told in dual perspectives as well. Obviously, I'm not going to list every book that is in dual perspectives. These are just some books that I would recommend for a readathon, or just in general that I really, really enjoyed. I did have to get you guys to help me because I haven't read every single book that's out there in the world, and obviously I kind of only read contemporary romances, so I wanted to kind of broaden my recommendation. So I asked on Twitter, on my Magical Hopathon Twitter. If you're not following me over there, then I highly recommend you do so, because that is where all the updates for the readathon will be before and during the readathon. So make sure you are following my Twitter. I'll leave it linked down below for you. But I did ask you guys on Twitter for some help regarding recommending some books. and you guys pulled through. I got some great recommendations. So some of them are from me and some of them are from other people. I'm just curating loads of recommendations here for you guys to help you out when you are making your TBR. So the next prompt category I wanted to cover was Mickey's Friendship Fair, which is again at the Magic Kingdom for a show, and that is to read a book that centers around friendship. Obviously for this prompt, I kind of want you to read a book that heavily centers around friendship. There can be other aspects such as romance in these books, but I just want the main plot device to be friends. So the first one I'm recommending is Loveless by Alice Oseman. I read this book at the beginning of this year and absolutely loved it. It basically follows our main character Georgia, who is going off to university. She's always wanted a first kiss, she's always wanted a boyfriend, but she comes to university and really starts to discover herself and realise that she's asexual, aromantic, and it just heavily focuses around friendships because she is aromantic, and she realises that she doesn't just have to have a romantic relationship to have and feel love, and I think it's a beautiful book about friendship. So this is definitely one that you could read for this readathon. And if you guys know me and you've been following my channel for a while, pause the video and comment down below which book I'm going to recommend next. If you don't get it right, then you clearly don't know me that well. The next book I'm recommending for a book that centers around friendship is Olive by Emma Gannon. It basically follows our main character Olive, who, when all her friends from university, they're really close-knit and she doesn't think they're ever gonna kind of break, and then they all kind of start settling down, going off and buying houses in the suburbs, having kids, and Olive just doesn't feel this way and she wants to not go in that direction, and she feels really lost because that's where society are kind of pushing her to. She doesn't want kids, she doesn't want to get married, so she's trying to navigate her early 30s in when society gives all that pressure onto having kids, settling down, getting married, buying a house. So Olive just kind of discovers herself in this book through her friends and herself. It does focus heavily on herself, but her friends are definitely there for moral support. I think it definitely covers the prompt, Mickey's Friendship Fair, to read a book that centers around friendship. A couple of other books that you guys recommended to me for this prompt, thanks Ro for all these recommendations, is Truth Witch by Sarah Dinard, I think is the author, but Truth Witch and that entire series is apparently very platonic and has no kind of romantic elements, so you could read that if you're into fantasy. And another one Ro recommended was A Forest of Souls. I don't know the author, but I recognise the name. I'll put a cover up on the screen. Apparently this one also focuses a lot about platonic relationships. So those are a few suggestions if you want to fulfill the prompt of Mickey's Friendship Fair to read a book that centres around friendship. Now the whole reason I decided to do this video was because people in the premiere chat was like, the Epcot World Showcase prompt seems really complex, can you please kind of talk through it and give us some recommendations? So here I am. Basically Epcot, just to kind of reiterate, at the back of the park, it has a massive kind of lake called the Lagoon, and around it are different pavilions showcasing different parts of the world. There is a Mexico pavilion, there is a Norway pavilion, there is a China pavilion, a Germany pavilion, a France pavilion, a UK pavilion, a Canada pavilion, an American pavilion, a Japan pavilion, an Italy pavilion, and I think that's all of them. I could be wrong, but basically for this prompt, all you need to do is pick one of those countries and read a book that's either been translated from its native language. So say if you wanted to do Mexico, it's Spanish, for example. But if you wanted to do Japan, it'd be Japanese. China, Chinese, you get the gist. Obviously, if you're native in English, don't pick like UK, Canada, or America, because their kind of first language is English, obviously, unless you're in Canada and the book was written in French first. So you kind of get the gist. If it's not your native language and it's been translated to your native language, so for me, one of the easiest prompts to do is Japan, which I will be doing. So I'm going to take a book that was written in Japanese and translated to English for me to read, because obviously I don't speak Japanese. I would love to, but I don't. So I need that book translated, if that makes sense. So that is one of the ways you could go down this prompt. The other way you could go down this prompt is pick one of the pavilions and read a book that is set in that country. Or if you want to go down a different route, you can read a book where the author is from that country. So a Mexican author, a Japanese author, but maybe wrote the book in English first off, or a Canadian author, or an American author, or an Italian author. You get the gist. So here are some book recommendations based off the World Showcase prompt in Epcot. By the way, this will complete your snack prompt in Epcot. I've only read one of these books out of this entire list that I've curated, so bear with me. I'm just going to be listing off some book titles for you to kind of look into yourselves, because I personally haven't read them, so I don't really know what they're about, but I've done some research. And obviously, if you have more recommendations, let's make a massive recommendations list down below in the comments. If you have recommendations for any of these prompts, let people know down in the comments so people can look in the comments and get further recommendations. Let's just make this a whole kind of recommendations video. So the first one is France I didn't think I said France. But France is a pavilion at Epcot, and The Little Prince was translated from French to English. It originally is a French classic, apparently, so you could read The Little Prince as a short, quick book to get through. There are a lot for like Japan, because a lot of books recently have been translated from Japan to English. Just a few are Before the Coffee Gets Cold, which I know is very big on BookTube, and it's very small, so perfect for a readathon. You could also read something like There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job, which is also on my TBR, but I have not read yet. So there are a lot for the Japanese pavilion in the way of translation. For example, in Mexico, this is more kind of set in rather than a translated work. You could read Mexican Gothic because it is set in Mexico, or you could read Aristotle and Dante Discovers the Secret of the Universe, because Benjamin Hilaire Sands is from New Mexico, so I'll kind of count that as Mexico if you wanted to maybe read that book. And just a few book recommendations for set in those countries. I haven't done all the pavilions because I just want to give you a gist of what you could do to complete these prompts, and then you can kind of take these recommendations, think, oh okay, she means that, and kind of go off and do your own research. So I'm just giving you a few here. Obviously you don't have to read one of these books that I'm mentioning today in this video to complete that prompt. You can go off and do your own research. I just want to give you some inspiration and some ideas. So for set in China, you could read Cinder by Marie Lu. You could read Love Boat Taipei, because that is also set in China. And you could also read any Marie Lu book, because she is originally from China, so that could be for the direction of author from one of those countries. So there are a lot of options for Epcot. I hope I've covered some ideas and some recommendations for you, and you can go off and kind of figure out a book for this prompt, because I realise World Showcase in Epcot is the only snack prompt, so you kind of have to read a book that is set in one of those countries, where the author is from one of those countries, or is being translated from their native language. A couple of ideas for Epcot's Guardians of the Galaxy show, which is the prompt to read a book that is either set in the 80s, gives you off 80s vibes, or is published in the 80s. I think it's quite straightforward for published in the 80s or is set in the 80s, but for 80s vibes, which is kind of the direction I would go down, my top recommendation would be The Danger Gang by Tom Fletcher. Not only is this kind of like a fantasy middle grade that has kind of like spooky vibes, so perfect for this time of year, it just gives me 80s vibes because they go around town on their bikes, and that for me reminds me of Stranger Things on Netflix, and obviously Stranger Things is kind of inspired and set in the 80s, so that's kind of how I make the connection with this one. If that's how you want to kind of fit the prompt for that book and try and make it fit, go for it. I'm totally like down for that. Just try and stretch the prompts as much as possible and get books that you want to read on this TBR, because all I want to do in this readathon is make it fun and enjoyable for everyone. I don't want anyone to go out and have to buy books. I don't want anyone to have to like read books that I don't want to just to fulfill prompts. So if you have to stretch way far, like I kind of did with Danger Gang, go for it. But this definitely gives me 80s vibes for that reason. Bro also came through for a recommendation for the 80s vibes, and that is My Best Friend's Exorcism, which for me definitely feels 80s when I look at the cover. So if it's the cover, if it's the plot, if it's anything that gives you 80s vibes, whether it's obviously published in the 80s or is set in the 80s. For Hollywood Studios, one of the prompts is Star Tours, to read a book that takes you out of this world, and that could be anything that either draws you out of the current situation you are in, whether that is stress, whether you just want to get away from COVID talk, whatever book kind of transports you to a different world, whether that's fictional or just out of your own like reality, go for it. Personally, this could literally be any book, because any book that I read takes me out of my current situation, my current world, so therefore takes me out of this world, literally. Or you could do something that kind of reminds you of Star Wars, so stars on the cover, has, I don't know, a night sky theme of colours, or kind of like a gradient galaxy sky as the front cover. So Becky Chambers, for example, could be one. Whether that is like you being taken out of this world, whether the cover is kind of spacey, or whether the book plot takes you out of reality, so going to space, going into a fantasy world, like maybe Kiss of Deception, where it's about a princess and a prince and an assassin. Anything that isn't real, basically, for this prompt, or just takes you out of the current situation of the world, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. I haven't got any book recommendations for this one, because this is up to your interpretation, and go as free as you want to. The next kind of tricky Hollywood Studios prompt I have is Toy Story Mania, and that is to read a book where the main character isn't human, and that is A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Buchman. This book obviously follows our main character Uwe, who is a grumpy old man, and one day a cat from the neighbourhood he lives in starts kind of following him along, and the cat is a really good aspect of this book, and I really enjoyed kind of following the cat along on this story. So although not the main character, because it doesn't have to be the main character, as long as a non-human character is heavily featured, then you can totally fulfill that prompt with a certain book. So Man Called Uwe definitely works for this one. And obviously really, really basic. You could just read any kind of fantasy where vampires, monsters, ghosts, I don't know, any sort of mythical creature, centaurs, I don't know, any kind of non-human fantasy mythical character also counts for this prompt as well. And then another one I thought of was The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, because Death is the main character, and obviously he isn't human. He used to be human, but he's no longer human when he's narrating the book, so something like that could work as well. In Hollywood Studios, there is also a prompt for Beauty and the Beast to read a retelling. A few that I would recommend is Recipe for Persuasion by Sonali Dev. I read this as an audiobook a couple of months ago, but this book is a retelling of Persuasion by Jane Austen, hence the name Recipe for Persuasion. And Sonali Dev also has other books in this kind of companion series, are retellings of different classics as well. I think she has one for Pride and Prejudice, etc. So you could definitely look into those books if you are interested in some kind of more like romancy, steamy, enemies to lovers sort of romances for this readathon. We then have a really cute middle grade that is inspired by Little Woman, which I recently read as an audiobook and then brought the physical copy because I loved it so much. More to the Story by Henna Khan. I really, really enjoyed this book, and it is a retelling of Little Woman, so definitely an option, and it's so quick to get through because it is a middle grade, so a perfect option for a readathon. Then we have some other recommendations from other people. Legendborn by Tracy Dion is apparently a King Arthur retelling, so you could definitely read that one. We have A Curse So Dark and Lonely by I can see the author's name. A Curse and Bridget Kemmerer, I think, is the author for this one, and it's obviously a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, which would be perfect because obviously the prompt is Beauty and the Beast, the live stage musical, so definitely a good one to go to. And apparently a new release that is a retelling of The Great Gatsby is The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nevo, so that is definitely an option as well, and I think it is pretty short by the TBR videos I've been watching where that book features. It doesn't look very long at all, so that's definitely an option. And then finally, Geekerella is a companion series that has different princess retellings, so perfect for a Disney theme readathon, and this one obviously follows Cinderella's main story, so this is definitely an option for you as well. And I know there's other books in the series as well, like Beauty and the Geek, Beauty and the Beast, and other things like that, so you could definitely read that one as an option if you're looking for kind of like a romance young adult contemporary book to read for a retelling. The next prompt I have is in Animal Kingdom, and that is Dinosaur, which is an attraction there, and that is to read a book that features time travel. Obviously the main one I kind of think of, because it is fairly new to the booktube universe, is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. Definitely counts for this prompt because it does feature time travel. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch could count for this prompt because it features parallel universes and time traveling in that aspect. This is totally a direction you could go down regarding this prompt. Midnight Library by Matt Haig could totally count as time travel because, as far as I'm aware, it follows our main character who is on the cusp of dying, and she goes through multiple doors to try and figure out where her life kind of went wrong, I believe. I could be totally wrong in saying that, but because it features multiple doors and multiple directions of her life, I'm counting that as time travel. So this totally could be a book you could read to fulfill the Dinosaur, a book featuring time travel prompt. A book that kind of features a repetitive day and therefore you keep going back in time to relive the same day is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which kind of focuses around a murder, and a person keeps reliving the same day but as a different person at that party to try and figure out who was murdered and who murdered that person, I think is the plot of that one. It actually sounds really intriguing, so that's definitely an option for time travel. Another one that kind of is a repetitive, Groundhog Day, I think is a name for that sort of thing. Groundhog Day is The Opposite of Always by Jason Reynolds. Is also a book where the main character has to keep reliving the same day to try and figure out what went wrong. So that could be an option for this prompt as well. And then also in Animal Kingdom, you have an attraction called Kilimanjaro Safaris, and the prompt for that is to read a book that features a road trip or travels across multiple locations. For this one, once again, you could go for Dark Matter by Blake Crouch because multiple locations includes multiple versions of the same universe, so I totally count this for that one. You could also have The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon because this book basically follows our main character Paige, who gets kidnapped and taken to a different part of the country where the rest of her clairvoyance gang are currently situated. So you have London and Oxford, so this could be a book for the multiple locations aspect of this prompt. And then you could take this prompt very literally and read The Road Trip by Beth O'Leary, which is about 5 friends who all have to go to a wedding in the same car after an ex's car breaks down and he has to hop into his ex's car. I think this book's going to be hilarious. I haven't read it yet, but this definitely fits the prompt because it's literally called The Road Trip. And then if you want a really, really quick read, because I read this book during a readathon and I read it in one day, that is The Field Notes on Love by Jennifer E. Smith, which features two main characters who go on a train journey around America before they start university. So more of a coming of age YA story that is so quick to get through and has a really cute romance, but also features massively on family dynamic of the main male protagonist in this book. And that's why I love this book so much, was because of the family dynamics. So if you like family dynamics in YA, definitely recommend this one. And it does obviously travel across America, so definitely fits multiple locations and a road trip for this prompt. The last prompt I wanted to cover and give you some recommendations for was Animal Kingdom's Cheese Pod, which is a snack there, and that is the prompt to read a book across multiple formats or genres. The first one I have is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, and this is because I believe it to be historical fiction slash mystery, so anything along those lines, a mystery slash contemporary, if you can get that, a fantasy slash romance, etc. Anything along that sort of line, anything that merges two genres together that you can find definitely fits this prompt. This is just one suggestion of a historical mystery. And another one quite out there prompt that I would totally count for this prompt is Black Buck by Matea Ascarapur, and this is because it is a contemporary, but it also heavily features self-help, and for me that are two different genres because it's kind of like a non-fiction, but it's also kind of a contemporary. So you could definitely go along the lines of this for this prompt. You could also go along the lines of Malibu Rising, which features two timelines, present and past. This definitely counts for that sort of prompt. Basically anything that merges two things together that don't usually go together. So past and present, you could do two genres, like I keep saying, mystery and historical fiction, or kind of historical fiction and romance, etc. Or two different formats of books, so you could listen to an audiobook while you're reading along to the physical copy. So that could be any book as long as you had the audiobook and the physical copy. So anything along the lines can fit cheeseburger pods. So with that being said, I really hope these suggestions have kind of been helpful to you and given you some ideas and prompts on how you can kind of complete some of the more out there and complex prompts for this readathon. Let me know if you've already done your TBR and which books you're going to be reading for certain prompts. I have loved seeing you guys on social media posting your TBRs. It's made my heart so happy and I cannot wait to read with you all in October. I can't wait. And also just to let you know, if you've made it to the end, a little sneak peek, I have figured out my live show schedule, so that should be coming soon as well, so keep an eye out on the Twitter for that. Once again, make sure you are following me on that Twitter so you get the latest updates regarding the readathon. And with that being said, I will leave you to it. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, make sure you give it a massive thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel to make sure you don't miss any more magical Hopathon content. And without further ado, I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.